They silenced the last Earth convoy. The Sun weapon-fired HFY SciFi Stories. The stylus touched the page and stopped. Dune Vessel had been keeping records for the Galactic Concordance for 31 years. In that time, the stylus had never stopped mid-stroke. Not once. Not when the Vethari annexed 3 border systems in a single session. Not when the Halesi delegation voted to extend Keth Voral's administrative authority for the 4th time. Not when the last Earth convoy went dark 19 hours ago, and the silence on that frequency became the kind of silence that files itself. The dissolution notice sat on the desk. It was 1 page, formally stamped with Keth Voral's reading claw impression in dark blue ink. 214 words, every one of them correct. No protest filed, no alert sent, no response. The document dissolved the Silence Covenant, a 230-year framework of non-aggression between the Vethari Consolidated Reach and Earth. It cited Earth's persistent failure to achieve strategic relevance as grounds. It had been transmitted to the Concordance on a standard administrative frequency at 300 station time. Dune Vessel read it, then read it again. The only light in the annotation room was the pale glow of the desk screen and the bioluminescent strip along Dune Vessel's jaw, a strip that had stayed at full brightness for 31 years of keeping this file. Through every decision the Concordance had made and failed to make, through every convoy incident logged and set aside. It was dimming now. In 31 years, the stylus had paused mid-annotation exactly once. That time, a species had gone extinct. The last time that stylus stopped moving, a species disappeared. Stay with me. 19 hours earlier, Keth Voral had been annotating a routine annexation schedule when his technical officer placed the convoy's final transponder log on his desk. He was on the flag deck of the Dominion's Margin, his command vessel, 4.1 kilometers of Vethari Administrative Authority holding position, 18 astronomical units from Earth's heliopause. The flag deck smelled of warm metal and the faint mineral sharpness of Vethari processing, fluid, the scent of machinery that had not been turned off in 19 years. Voral did not look up right away. He was 7.3 feet tall, gray-green carapace across his shoulders catching the overhead lights, jaw plates at rest. When he finally picked up the log, he held it in his right hand the way he held every signed order, as though the paper itself was the authority, and reading it was the act that made it real. 312 crew, 4 supply freighters, 1 escort vessel, no military classification on any of them. He set the log beside the annexation schedule. He picked up his annotation stylus. He pressed his reading claw into the approval line and said, "Log it as an administrative suppression action. Open a channel to the Concordance. Tell them the Silence Covenant has been formally terminated." His subcommander, a younger officer named Verk, noted something quietly. The convoy had never broadcast a distress signal. Voral looked at him for a moment. Then he returned to the annexation schedule. He had filed 6 dissolution notices in his career. The other 5 species had accepted them. He assumed this was because dissolution notices were persuasive documents. He was mistaken about the mechanism. He would not understand his mistake for another 19 hours. The Concordance Deliberation Annex on Ethon Station was 400 meters wide, with a ceiling so high that the upper tier of the observer galleries disappeared into ambient haze. The walls were pale gray composite stone, cold to the touch even in a pressurized atmosphere. The air smelled of recycled oxygen and the particular chemical sharpness of Halesi annotation ink. A smell Dune Vessel had stopped noticing years ago, the way you stop noticing the weight of something you carry every day. The Vethari delegation occupied the primary tier. 12 representatives, each one taller than the species to either side, reading claws working continuously. They annotated in real time. Everything filed, everything logged, everything correct. Earth's desk sat in the outer ring, 1 chair empty. It had been empty for 11 years, since Earth's most recent reclassification petition was formally acknowledged by the Concordance. Acknowledged meant a response had been generated. It did not mean a decision had been made. Dune Vessel knew the exact language of that response. He had filed it himself. Petition received. Status acknowledged pending review. The Concordance reclassification queue currently held 4,400 entries ahead of Earth's. The queue moved at 3 resolutions per year. Dune Vessel had done this math once in the early years and then decided not to repeat it. He was doing it now. There was one other desk in the outer ring that Dune Vessel watched without appearing to watch. The Fenari observer, a compact, copper-scaled delegate named Teth Sali, had held that desk for 6 years. She was heat-tolerant in a way that made the cold stone chamber look like it cost her nothing. She kept her files in a system that Dune Vessel had never fully understood because the Fenari did not have a word for classified in their primary language. What they knew, they shared. What they learned, they kept. Teth Sali had been briefed on something 40 years ago before she was born because the Fenari briefing system worked that way. The brief passed through generations. Dune Vessel did not know what it contained. She was reading a secondary screen now. Dune Vessel could not see what was on it. She had not moved in 2 hours. Director Marin Saul entered the Pale Anchor command room at 3:47 station time, and no one announced her. She was 53 years old, 29 years in Earth's Strategic Infrastructure Division, with the kind of face that processed information faster than it showed it. Short, dark hair going gray at the temples. A worn brass transit compass in the left breast pocket of her uniform jacket. The same pocket, the same compass for 11 years. Her predecessor had given it to her on the last day of his tenure and said, "You'll know when to use it." She had never opened it. The Pale Anchor Station was registered with the Concordance as a decommissioned navigational relay facility, 94 million kilometers from Earth's sun. The official record listed 3 solar focusing arrays in its maintenance inventory. The official record also noted minor maintenance deficiencies across all 3, which had been the finding of every Concordance infrastructure audit for the last 40 years. 7 audits in total. All 7 had returned the same result. Commander Pel Idris was at the primary console. He had been on the Pale Anchor maintenance crew for 17 years. In that time, he had never spoken the station's true designation aloud outside a shielded room. Not once, not even to people who already knew. Signals Officer Tova Naz was at her station, 9 years in the division. She had a list folded inside her left sleeve, the names of the 11 crew members from the most recent classified Convoy incident, the one that had been logged as a navigational loss 83 days ago. She had written it by hand. Saul looked at Idris. She looked at Naz. She did not look at the compass. "What do we have?" she said. Naz read from her screen. "Confirmed Vethari suppression signature on the Convoy frequency. Matches the pattern from 9 prior incidents." She paused. "The oldest match in the file is 91 years old." Saul was quiet for 4 seconds. "Show me the queue status," she said. The screen showed Earth's reclassification petition at its usual position. Acknowledged, pending review. 31 years, 4,400 entries ahead. The queue moved at 3 per year. No ship in Earth's formation. No fleet holding position. No military classification on any vessel in the solar system. Saul looked at it for 2 seconds. Then she said, "Pull the Vethari sector file, all 11 incidents. I want the suppression signatures cross-referenced." Idris pulled the file. What came up was not 11 incidents. It was 11 classified entries, 4 of which had been flagged for concordance review by the archive keeper, none of which had been acted upon. The oldest was 91 years old. The newest was the Convoy that had gone dark 19 hours ago. 312 crew, 4 freighters, 1 escort, no distress signal. Naz pressed her left sleeve against her wrist without looking down at it. Saul read the file once through. She set it aside. She looked at Idris and she said, "What's the activation window?" 16-character physical sequence, Idris said. 2 stations simultaneously. Array comes online in 8 seconds after both keys are entered. Any concordance alerts triggered by the startup sequence. No, the startup signature reads as a routine maintenance cycle, same as the last 40 years. Saul nodded once. In the Concordance Annex, back on Ethan Station, Keth Vorel was presenting the dissolution notice to the full Concordance session. He held the document in his right hand. He did not need to read from it, he had written it, but he held it anyway, because a document in the hand was an authority in the room. The Silence Covenant, he said, was a provisional framework established under conditions that no longer apply. Earth has held observer-tier status for 31 years without advancement. The Vethari Consolidated Reach has administrative obligations in this sector that the Covenant has prevented us from meeting. He set the notice on the presentation surface. This is not an act of aggression. It is a reclassification. His jaw plates were still, not the clicking stillness of processing, the deeper stillness of certainty. He had done this 6 times. He knew how the room felt when a dissolution notice was correct. The concordance session noted the document. A formal recording was opened. Representatives from 14 species annotated their acknowledgments. Dune Vessel annotated the session record, the stylus moving steadily. Teth Sali was watching her secondary screen. She had not annotated anything. The confirmation reached Pale Anchor at 4:12. Sol read it once. She placed one hand flat on the surface of the console, a habit from her first command posting, something she did when she needed 3 seconds before answering, and then she lifted her hand. "Get me the second station," she said. "Idris, you're on Gray Meridian Link. I need Commander Preth on the key sequence." Nas opened the channel. "Gray Meridian standing by. Commander Preth confirms ready." Sol looked at the viewport. The sun was a white point 94 million kilometers away. The 3 caretaker installations were invisible against it, registered as minor deficiencies in a file no one had looked at closely enough for long enough to ask the right question. Idris had built it, Nas had maintained it, Sol had waited for it. Sol said, "Begin the maintenance cycle." 40 years before Tova Nas was born, a decision had been made. The decision had no name at the time. It would eventually be called the Caretaker Array by the people who knew about it, which was not many and never in a room without shielding. The decision was this: Earth was not going to fight the Vethari the way the Vethari expected to be fought. It was not going to build a fleet because a fleet could be counted. It was not going to develop weapons because weapons could be found in an audit. It was going to do something the Vethari had never encountered from a species they had classified as low priority. It was going to wait, and while it waited, it was going to build something that looked like nothing. The 3 solar focusing installations had been constructed over a period of 190 years, their components absorbed into 7 different Earth infrastructure programs: asteroid mining, deep-range beacon maintenance, relay station upkeep. No single budget line showed the whole picture. No single auditor had been cleared to see all 7 programs at once. The Concordance infrastructure teams had inspected the installations 7 times. All 7 audits returned the same finding: minor maintenance deficiencies, no strategic significance. The 6th audit's lead inspector had written in his personal log, not the official report, the personal log, that the human maintenance team seemed unusually attentive for a maintenance crew. The log was never filed. Each installation was 3.8 kilometers long. Each had been in continuous solar collection mode for 40 years. Each was positioned at 120-degree intervals around the inner solar system, 94 million kilometers from the sun. Their official designation in the Concordance Registry was Solar Relay Station Alpha 7, Alpha 12, and Alpha 19. They had been under maintenance for 4 decades. The 16-character activation sequence took 11 seconds to enter Sol at Pale Anchor, Commander Preth at Gray Meridian, both entering their halves simultaneously. The array came online in 8 seconds after that. No transmission was broadcast. No alert was filed with the Concordance. On Keth Voral's passive sensor array, 11 minutes after the sequence was completed, a readout appeared. His technical officer flagged it and forwarded it to Voral's display without comment. The reading showed an electromagnetic coherence bloom in Earth's inner solar system, tightly focused, building 37 times beyond any cataloged Earth infrastructure capacity. Voral looked at it for 6 seconds. He looked at the infrastructure file, 3 relay stations, minor maintenance deficiencies. He looked at the bloom again. He forwarded it to the technical log with the notation: sensor calibration error, disregard. "We have their infrastructure file," he said, not to anyone in particular. 3 relay stations, minor deficiencies. His jaw plates clicked once, then went still. In the Concordance Annex, Dune Vessel was cross-referencing the Vethari sector file against the new energy reading that had appeared on the Concordance's passive monitoring network. The reading was tagged as anomalous, origin, Earth solar region. It had appeared in the public monitoring feed 11 minutes after the Vethari session adjourned. Dune Vessel opened the infrastructure audit subfolder for Earth. He opened the 7 audit reports in order. He read the findings. All 7, minor maintenance deficiencies, no strategic significance. He opened the supplementary logs. The 6th audit's personal record was filed in the supplementary section. It was not part of the official finding. It had been uploaded by the audit team's administrative assistant and never cross-referenced to the main file because it was logged under the wrong classification tag. Dune Vessel read it, unusually attentive for a maintenance crew. He read the sentence 3 times. The stylist did not pause. Dune Vessel set it down entirely. The first time in 31 years the annotation had simply stopped, not paused, stopped, and he looked at the energy reading on his screen. The bloom was increasing. And it was aimed. In the outer ring, Teth Solly closed her file. She placed her copper-scaled hands flat on the desk. She looked at the same energy reading on the secondary display, the one she had been watching for 2 hours. Her jaw did not move. She did not reach for her annotation stylus. The Fenari had received a briefing on this 40 years ago. Teth Solly had been given it before she took this post. Along with the other things, the Fenari passed through generations because they did not have a word for classified. She knew what this energy reading was. She had been sitting in the outer ring for 6 years, watching the queue not move and the convoy incidents pile up and the dissolution notice get filed, waiting to see if this number would ever appear on a screen. It had appeared. She did not speak, she watched. The bloom was increasing. And it was aimed. Dune Vessel picked up the stylus, set it down again. The screen showed the energy reading still climbing steady, not spiking, the way a thing climbs when it has been designed to climb at exactly this rate. Not a malfunction, not a calibration error, a process. 31 years of keeping this file, 11 classified incidents, 4 flagged for review, none acted upon. The oldest was 91 years old. Dune Vessel pulled the full Vethari sector file and began reading from the beginning. The first classified incident was logged 91 years ago as a navigational loss, a small Earth cargo vessel that had gone off course near the Vethari shipping boundary and never come back. The concordance record showed it as an accident. The Earth petition filed in response had been noted and placed in the standard review queue. It was still there. The second incident was 83 years ago. Third, 77. The pattern did not speed up or slow down. One incident every 7 to 9 years, each one logged the same way, each one receiving the same response from the concordance. Noted, filed, pending. Dune Vessel read all 11 entries in order. He had flagged 4 of them for review over the years. He had written the flags carefully in the correct format with the correct supporting citations. None of them had been acted upon. The oldest flag was 19 years old. It sat in the review queue behind 4,000 other flags, moving at the same speed as everything else. 3 resolutions per year. He closed the file and looked at the energy reading again. On the flag deck of the Dominion's margin, Keth Voral's technical officer had flagged the bloom a second time. The first flag had been filed as a calibration error 18 minutes ago. This second flag noted that the bloom had grown. It was now 42 times beyond any catalogued Earth infrastructure capacity. It was coherent, not spreading, not dissipating, but holding shape across 380 million kilometers of space. Voral looked at the reading. He looked at the infrastructure file on his secondary screen. 3 relay stations, minor deficiencies, 7 concordance audits, all the same finding. He read the second flag. He read it again. His jaw plates clicked, the sound of processing, the sound of a category not fitting, and then went still. "This is not possible," he said, not to anyone, to the document. He reached for his annotation stylus. He held it above the flag for 3 seconds. He did not annotate it. Saul was standing at the viewport in the Pale Anchor command room. The sun was a white point 94 million kilometers away. The 3 caretaker installations were invisible against it. 3.8 kilometers each, positioned at perfect intervals, running on 190 years of stored solar energy, reading on every concordance registry as minor maintenance deficiencies. Behind her, Idris was checking a power reading on the activation console. He had checked it 4 minutes ago. He checked it again. Saul adjusted the collar of her uniform jacket. She did not turn around. "What's the charge status?" she said. "Full," Idris said. "Has been full for 11 years. She nodded once. Nas spoke from her station. The 48-hour protest window opened 19 hours ago. We have 29 hours left to file a formal objection with the concordance. We're not filing an objection, Saul said. Nas did not respond to that. She looked at the list folded inside her sleeve, not taking it out, just pressing her wrist against it through the fabric, the way she had been doing since the convoy went dark. 312 names. 4 freighters. 1 escort. No distress signal, because the suppression array had gone up before any of them had time to key one in. What happened next had no announcement. No warning broadcast on the concordance emergency frequency. No demand. No ultimatum filed with the Vethari delegation. No transmission on any channel from any Earth station to any Vethari vessel. Saul said, "Fire." Idris entered the command sequence. It took 4 seconds. The first focused beam left the Alpha 7 installation and crossed 380 million kilometers of space in 21 minutes. It arrived at the outer edge of the Vethari formation without a sound. There is no sound in space, and there was no sound on the Vethari passive arrays either, only a new line in a data readout, appearing where there had been no line before. The beam did not target a vessel. It targeted the suppression array that Voral's fleet had deployed 19 hours ago to silence the convoy. The array detonated. The detonation triggered 11 secondary detonations in 4 minutes. Ordnance the Vethari had seeded in the shipping lanes at the edge of that sector 80 years ago and never retrieved, because 80-year-old ordnance in a sector you control is not a concern. It was a concern now. 12 Vethari vessels were gone in 4 minutes. Voral broadcast a ceasefire demand on the standard concordance frequency. His voice was steady. He had done this before, not with weapons, but with documents, and the principle was the same. You state the position. You wait for compliance. The mechanism was filing a position so clearly that the other party had no choice but to accept it. The channel returned nothing. He waited 40 seconds. He broadcast again. Under Concordance Article 14, this engagement constitutes an unregistered act of aggression. You will stand down and transmit your authorization codes immediately. The channel returned nothing. His formation pulled back 800 kilometers, not retreat, repositioning. He had 34 escort vessels remaining and 8 suppression arrays, 2 of which had just gone offline. Standard doctrine: tighten the formation, widen the sensor coverage, wait for the next move. The next move came 17 minutes after the first beam. The second beam was aimed differently, not at the mine field, at the 2 remaining active suppression arrays on the near flank of the formation. Both arrays went offline in the same second. Voral's formation lost sensor coverage on a 60-degree arc of the engagement zone. His technical officer was already running the recalculation when Voral broadcast a third time, not a demand this time. A question. What treaty governs this action? Nothing. Under what authority are you firing? Nothing. Who authorized? The third beam fired before he finished the sentence. It did not hit a vessel. It hit the formation's primary communications relay, the node that connected all 34 escort ships to the Dominion's Margins command channel. The relay went dark. For 47 seconds, Voral's fleet was 35 separate ships with no shared command link. 47 seconds is a very long time in an engagement. Idris had built it, Nas had maintained it, Saul had waited for it. 3 people in a room on a station that the Concordance had inspected 7 times and never looked at closely enough. Saul had not moved from the viewport. She was watching the sun, not the readouts, not the tactical display, just the white point 94 million kilometers away. The same sun that had been feeding those 3 installations for 40 years without anyone asking the right question about where all that stored energy was going. Formation status, she said. Nas read from her screen. 34 escort vessels. Formation cohesion broken. Communications relay offline. 2 of 8 suppression arrays offline. The Dominion's Margin is holding position. Are they moving? No, engines at minimum. Saul looked at the sun for another 4 seconds. Then she said, "What's the charge status on Alpha 12? Full, Nas said. All 3 still full. Saul nodded. She did not order the 4th beam immediately. She waited 90 seconds. She let the channel stay empty for 90 seconds. The same channel Vorel had been broadcasting on. The same frequency his dissolution notice had traveled down at 300 station time with its correct format and its reading claw impression and its 214 words. Then she said, "Fire Alpha 12. The fourth beam hit the Dominion's margins forward sensor array, not the hull, not the engines, not the bridge. The sensor array. When it went offline, Vorel's command vessel lost its ability to track anything inside a 400 million kilometer radius. 4.1 kilometers of Vethari administrative authority, holding position in the dark. Vorel broadcast once more on the emergency frequency. His voice was still steady, Dune Vessel would note later, reviewing the recording. Whatever Keth Vorel was, he was not a man who panicked in the face of things he did not understand. He filed them, categorized them, and waited for a framework to emerge. "I am requesting direct communication with Earth's authorized representative," he said. "Under Concordance Protocol, any active engagement requires." He stopped, not because the channel cut out, because he had realized partway through the sentence that there was no Earth representative in the Concordance chamber. There was an empty chair in the outer ring. There was a petition in the queue, position 4401. There was a 48-hour protest window that had opened 19 hours ago. Earth had not filed a protest. Earth had filed something else entirely. There was no fifth beam. There did not need to be. Vorel's surviving formation held position, 34 escort vessels, 1 command ship with no forward sensors, engines at minimum, communications relay offline on the escort fleet. No strategic threat. No movement toward Earth. No movement anywhere. Dune Vessel was watching his screen when Tova Naz's transmission came through. It arrived on the standard administrative frequency, the same frequency the dissolution notice had been sent on, at 300 station time, the same frequency every Vethari treaty dissolution had traveled down for 9,400 years of consolidated reach administrative history. The transmission was 9 words. No warning, no declaration, no mercy. We did not fire because we were afraid. We fired because we were done asking. Dune Vessel read it once. He read it again. The jaw strip along his jaw, which had dimmed when the dissolution notice arrived, which had gone dark when he found the personal log, which had been dark for the last 40 minutes, returned to full brightness. Not because the outcome was good. Not because 31 years of convoy incidents and unanswered flags had been resolved into something clean, but because the record had to be right, and the record was now ready to be written correctly, and Dune Vessel had been trained since childhood that the moment after the thing happens is when the Halesi must be most clear. The stylus touched the page. In the pale anchor command room, Saul stood at the viewport for another minute after Nas confirmed the transmission had been sent and logged. Then she reached into her left breast pocket. She took out the brass compass. Worn at the edges, the hinge darkened from years of body heat without ever being opened. Her predecessor's gift, his last words on his last day, "You'll know when to use it." She held it for 4 seconds. She put it back without opening it. She had known when to use it. She had decided it still wasn't time. She turned around. "Log the engagement as a maintenance action," she said. "File it under infrastructure cycle completion." Nas logged it. Idris logged his activation sequence as a routine power test. The 3 caretaker installations were already powering down to standby mode, their official registry status unchanged. Minor maintenance deficiencies, no strategic significance. The Concordance would never receive a military record of what had happened here because no military action had taken place. What had taken place was a maintenance cycle. The paperwork was complete. Post-climax, on the Dominion's margins flag deck, Keth Vorel sat in front of his annotation console for a long time. He had not filed a document in 51 minutes. In 19 years of command, the longest gap before that had been 9 minutes, during a cascade failure in the margins filing system that had required a manual restart. He had not filed because he did not know which form to use. There was no form for this. He had checked. There was a form for unprovoked military aggression. There was a form for disputed treaty enforcement. There was a form for concordance article violations, for ceasefire requests, for formal protest lodgment, for after-action administrative review. None of them applied. Earth had not filed a military action. Earth had not filed a concordance protest. Earth had filed a maintenance log. His jaw plates were still, not the clicking stillness of processing, the flat stillness of a system that had run out of categories. Somewhere in the concordance review queue, a 31-year-old petition was in motion. He did not know this yet. In the concordance chamber on Ethan Station, the Vethari delegation filed an emergency session request at 11:40 station time. The request was correctly formatted. It cited the correct procedural articles. It was stamped with the correct authorization codes. It entered the standard review queue. Estimated processing time, 14 months. Teth Sali in the outer ring watched the delegation file the request. She watched the queue confirmation appear on the secondary display. She looked at it for a moment. Then she opened a new document. She worked on it for 11 minutes. The document was a formal reclassification inquiry on Earth's behalf, the first such filing in 31 years submitted by a non-Earth sponsor. The Fenari did not have a word for classified, which meant that everything the Fenari knew, they could share, and what they had known for 40 years was that the Earth briefing they had received described exactly one scenario in which the caretaker array would be activated. This was that scenario. The filing moved to position 7 in the active queue. Teth Sali closed the new document. She folded her hands on the desk. She did not speak. Dune Vessel worked through the night. He was not supposed to work through the night. The Halesi rotation schedule existed precisely to prevent the kind of accumulated fatigue that made records imprecise. But he stayed at his desk because the Vethari sector file had just become the most consequential open record in the concordance, and he had been its keeper for 31 years, and he was not willing to hand it to a relief keeper at this particular moment. He annotated the emergency session request. He annotated the queue confirmation. He annotated Teth Sali's reclassification filing and its new queue position. He annotated the energy readings from the passive monitoring network, cross-referenced to the concordance infrastructure audit records, cross-referenced again to the 11 classified convoy incidents with their 91-year span. He annotated the 9-word transmission from Earth on the standard administrative frequency. Then he opened the main Vethari sector subfolder. He had been keeping this file since the year he was assigned to the concordance 31 years ago. It had one subfolder. It had always had one subfolder. He had organized it carefully, maintained it correctly, flagged 4 items for review, and watched those flags sit in the queue while 3 items were resolved per year. He opened a second subfolder. He typed the header, Earth Active Party. The subfolder was empty. It was waiting for what came next. Dune Vessel did not know what came next, not specifically, not in the way you know a thing when you have a form for it. But he knew that the record would need to be clean, and that clean meant complete, and that complete meant starting the subfolder now. He looked at the dissolution notice still sitting in the primary archive, correctly formatted, correctly stamped, reading claw impression in dark blue ink, 214 words, every one of them right. He filed it in the archive, in the primary subfolder, under Vethari Administrative Actions, closed. He labeled the date. He labeled the outcome. The outcome field had a drop-down menu with 12 options. He scrolled through them. None of them were right either. He selected the closest one, which was action concluded, no response filed by recipient, and then he added a notation in the free text box below it. Recipient response filed under separate designation. See subfolder, Earth Active Party. He saved it. The new subfolder was still empty. The stylus was in his hand. The jaw strip was at full brightness, steady, the same brightness it had held for 31 years of keeping this file, and it would hold there now through whatever the next 31 years brought, because the record had to be right, and right meant starting with the correct header. The stylus touched the page. The ink went down clean.